hope you're enjoying our starting. Professor Bas Arts gave us a very nice overview of international forest policies and governance. And also, I think we're going to dig a bit more now into the topic with three additional speakers, and we can definitely now enter plenary number 2, colleagues. So here we're going to talk about how do forest policy work? Big question. They're going to be, I think it's a quite complex issue, but we might ask our speakers to give us the perspective from their point of view, based either in European countries or in African as well. So let's maybe start and rock it, I suggest. So maybe I call already on the stage with my colleagues here next to me with the tech, our 3 speakers. So we will hear from Suzanne Winter, which is the program director of forest for the Worldwide Fund for Nature, so WWF Germany. Then we have, which I just see here up here. Hi, Suzanne, welcome. I think we will start with you, if I may. So we will start with your short presentation. I give you 8 minutes time, so I think we can go on, right? You ready?
Yes, I'm ready, and I try to share my screen. So I hope that work. So hopefully you see my screen now, and I can go into full presentation mode. You can't see that, huh? Okay, so it's really a challenge. Hello, I'm Susanne Winter from WWF Germany, but I'm talking about, I'm the replacement for Hermine Kleiman, and she is based in WWF Kenya. And so I would like to present a study that we did on enabling factors to scale up forest landscape restoration, the rules of governance and economics. So 7.5 minutes. First, you have to know what forest landscape restoration looks like. So forest landscape restoration is much more than protecting forest or to restore forest. It's on enriching landscapes with trees to get the ecosystem services in the whole landscape, also at the agriculture fields. We did a study together with UFO what supports forest landscape restoration. And the context of that, I think everybody is aware of that. We have a severe forest loss. We have a lot of negative impacts on livelihoods, climate, biodiversity, and so on. And finally, this is all noted by a lot of programs and initiatives like the Big Bond Challenge to restore 150 million hectares, or AFR 100. That's the African initiative to restore 100 million hectares in Africa, or the New York Declaration on Forests that commits to restore worldwide with these initiatives like the 2020 initiative for South America to restore forest landscapes. So this is highly needed because in former time, 50% of the world was covered by forest, and now it's less than 30%. And why we have to stop the forest loss is obvious for us, but also for this biodiversity, because 4 or 5 species at the land is connected in the life cycle with the forest. And so if we lose forest, we lose this kind of biological diversity. WWF has a monitor on this biodiversity since 4 decades, and we see that the species diversity of the mammals is reduced in population size by close to 70%. So this is a very, very severe decrease, and we have to bend the curve on that. And we also can show that protected areas the area itself is increasing, but it's not managed sufficiently because we can't band with the protected areas. The
Opportunity. How do
oh, so do you hear me still? I just continue. So the purpose of the study is to identify enabling factors for forest landscape restoration, and we cut this study into three phases. So the first is the motivation phase. So what is the motivation to do so? The second is the implementation phase, and the third is the sustaining. So if you have a good result, how can you sustain it? Um, we we looked to 10 different case studies, and you can see where they are located. And we had a tool of data collection. We did some interviews and an extensive literature search on the success of these approaches. And all these 10 case studies, the governments and the or the more local communities were highly engaged in the forest landscape restoration approach. So, what are our findings? First, the forest cover or the tree enrichment in the landscape. What happened in the monitor? You can see in the upper left corner Vietnam. So they increased the forest cover mainly by plantation. Madagascar could stop the trend to lose forest. A part of Brazil did the same, and so Kenya started in 2050 at a very low level, and now they increased the tree cover, but the increase was the trend was stopped in the last years. So for the others, you also can see very different trends, especially the negatives. And the one in the upper right part, you can see Costa Rica, and they started very early to increase the forest cover in the country. And so this is one of the very, very successful examples. The same to Bhutan. So they started early in the 90s, and then they increased the forest cover substantially. So for Costa Rica, just to step here in, they already started. They lost forest until the 90s, and then they changed the whole country approach how to work with the forest. And you can see if the government is really dedicated, you can not easily, but immediately see the success of more forest up to more than half of the country of Costa Rica. So, because I do not have too much time, I just jump into the results of the implementation phase. So, what we found from the governance part, or the governance, you really need a package of locally adapted governance measures. If you want to have one approach, this does not work, and you have to evolve and adapt it over the time. Um, to show the success, you really need a data collection and monitoring. This is normally missing. And before you try to scale up, so we found it's not a good idea to start at the country level, but to start in a case study with a good monitoring, and then to accelerate the upscaling. So the biggest obstacle to do so is that you have a lot of inconsistencies and contradictions in land use, because you have different ministries. And so if you do not get this kind of forest landscape approach, the policy behind that, streamlined, then you will decrease your success in the restoration approach. Yeah, so yeah, there are other points like granting secure tenure rights at local land users and so on. And this is really key to do so if you want to sustain your success. Um, Yes, and the last result is acknowledge the opportunity cost for forest restoration for private owners and right holders. I think this is very, very key to have a very good communication. What does it mean if you do not restore the forest landscapes, and what happens then, especially under climate change processes, and what does that mean to lose the biological diversity? Okay, so the conclusion is that we have in place some global programs such the Bond Challenge and the New York Declaration on Forests, and we also have these regional initiatives for Africa and South America, and we are working on it to get a regional initiative in Asia too. But what is the results also show is that we need a long-term dedication of the government. And a very good land use planning and incentives. For example, in Costa Rica, they use the payment for ecosystem service, so taxes or payments for the water use, and that these money was then spent for the restoration approaches, that you have a circle of funding to sustain the whole approach. So 8 minutes are short. I have to stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was a very enlightening introduction, and you did very well in the 8 minutes. Provided us information about your work in different parts of the globe regarding forest restoration. How actually are you succeeding? What are the difficulties? And also what are the needs, showing clearly that it's necessary to have clear communication, to have the government on board, ready to then succeed in the implementation and scaling up of the project that you're dealing with. And say that, I think we will then give the mic to our second speaker, also colleagues from Europe. So welcome, Hélène Koch. She is part of the Confederation of the European Forest Owners, CEPF. Nice to see you again. Hélène, same goes for you. I just gave you the mic. You have your nice 8 minutes, and then we might gonna, of course, talk again all together in a Q&A. So Hélène, the floor is yours. Your mic, can you unmute your mic, please, Hélène? So I can hear you as well. Try again. No. You can unmute it. 1 second, I think Hélène is coming back to us. We gave her a minute. Sorry, colleagues, for the... Okay, I can see her again. Now she's coming up. Climb the... Yeah, no, I lost her again. Yes, wonderful. You are here now.
I'm here and you can hear me?
Very well. Great.
Super. So I've asked every...
We cannot hear you anymore. There is some tech problem here. You know what we do? Maybe we go with Cecile first, Hélène, and then in the greeting room we fix the issue, yeah? Okay, great. So please, colleagues...
This work. I would like to share the community forestry scheme. I think beside all what is going on now in our continent, the community forestry scheme is a scheme that is helping or involving.
All right, yeah, I'm back. Just want to give you an intro about Cecile. So Cecile was very sorry that she couldn't join our meeting today. And Cecile is the African woman from the Network for Community Management of Forest. She shared with us her video. So colleagues, we change a little bit now the modality. Let's play now the video from Cecile, and then we will get back to Hélène with a fixed mic. I hope so. Thank you. We can start.
communities, women and men, policies work. I would like to share the community forestry scheme. I think beside all what is going on now in our continent, the community forestry scheme is a scheme that is helping or involving communities, women and men, in the management of forests. Let me start by Cameroon. We started this process with the forestry law of 1994. At the beginning, as usual, we had a lot of conflict, people who were against, others who were in favor. But we understood that it was very important to get community forests, because at least forest communities, that is the communities that are living in the forest, whose life depend on forest, at least could have the opportunity to contribute and to participate and to benefit from the forest. So the community forestry scheme came in, and we started supporting communities to create community forests as stated by the law. Today, when I see how the scheme has evolved, we have community forestry scheme that is now adopted in Gabon, in the DRC, in the Central African Republic, in the Gambia, in Tanzania. You see in Guinea, Equatorial Guinea. I'm sure it will join other countries. And the particularity of this scheme is that women, as a collective property, have more access, more right to forest and forest resources, non-timber forest resources also, and they have the land where they can carry out their agroforestry activities. So for me, we have to continue to support this, and now we are even going further. We are now supporting communities to develop community forest-based enterprises. It means that they will be creating enterprises based on all what they are doing in the forest. And you see that different schemes, Cameroon is saying that community can get up to 5,000 hectares for 25 years renewable. The DRC is at 50,000 hectares without any limit. The Gambia also 50,000 hectares without limit. Gabon 25,000 hectares without limit. And we think that we have to continue to support this. At least we have also noted that there is less illegal activities in the forestry when it's a community forest. The governance system is improving, because at least they try to involve women, men, and the youth in the management of a community forest. And these are things that will bring in some added values, not only in the forestry exploitation, but also as a means for the communities to improve their living standard, but also to contribute to climate change, because if they are involved in forest restoration, they are involved in forest conservation, in biodiversity conservation. These are activities that will help rebuild the forest cover, one, but also will give the value, all the value that forests deserve, and the forest will be at the service of the communities, of the climate, of the environment in general. This is why I think this scheme should be supported, and we have to continue to help communities to create community forests and to manage them sustainably all over Africa. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe it's very important to let me try to explain what the community forest is. In reality, in Cameroon, in the DRC, in any of the countries that I cited, a community forest is an area from the forest or any other ecosystem that is attributed to a local communities which is living within the area. So it can be the neighboring a forest, and that community applies to the government to have a piece of that forest for the management of a given community. So the area is attributed for management to a community for their management. And the management of that forest by that community is based on what we call in some countries a management plan. In Cameroon and in the DRC, it's called simple management plan. It means it's a management plan, but it has been simplified so that it is elaborated a bit, it's a little bit less complicated than the management plan of, let's say, a logging company, for example. And that management plan is for 5 years, and every 5 years it has to be revised. And a community has the obligation to comply with the management plan, because that management plan should be validated by the forest administration. If a community, a given community to whom they have allocated a community forest does not comply with the management plan, the community forest can be thrown out from the community. So the government can take back that forest, and the community will stay with that community forest. And the community forest, as I was saying, has very advantages, offered a lot of advantages to a community, to a given community. First of all, it's a way, let's say it provides more room to women to access forest and forest resources. Also, it also improves the governance of the forest with less, even we can even say no more illegal exploitation of that community forest. When a community forest is given to a community, we have realized that it give right to more security. It secure more the community forest. So activities, illegal activities, are almost out of that area. So this is what I wanted to add. I hope that it helps you have a better understanding with this scheme that we are really promoting, and we think is a future for sustainable management of forests, for also addressing climate change, biodiversity conservation, but above all, improving the livelihood of the communities and women's right to forests.
Okay, let me put me back. Hello, great. So we had a contribution from Cecile, which I found it personally extremely inspiring, presenting us what does it mean community forestry in Africa, where is applied, and what also are the successful story, as well as the key elements. So we understood that through this scheme, illegal logging or illegal activities are actually tackled, as well as the involvement of the women, the entire community, the youth, men collaborating together with the government, embracing these practices, which actually succeed for 5-year planning, hopefully. This is a very interesting case. And now we jump again to Elaine with the more European example. So let me see if I can have Elaine. Perfect. Let me see if we can hear Elaine now.
Can you hear me now?
Very loud. That's very good. So I think, Elaine, you have your 8 minutes, and then let's start.
Okay, so well, I will try again to share with you my screen. Just let me know if you see it. Well, I see it appear, so I suspect it's good, so I'll start. So I've referred my title saying like looking at forest related policy in the EU bubble. So that's how like slang language to say we like the Brussels based community, which is sometimes seen as a very close bubble, and through the lens of European forest owner representative, because that's what I do for as work. So European forest owner, that's really the people we represent just to give you a broad idea, that's what it looks at the Europe level. So you can see that the different shade of brown, the more intense it is, the more biggest share of private forest there is. So just to give you an idea, in the European Union, 60% of the forests are privately owned. So that's quite a big number of country. If I zoom a bit to CEPF especially, so the Confederation of European Forest Owner, we have at the moment 20 members, so that our member are the national association that represent forest owner, and we have associated net member because sometimes it made sense to have like regional association. But I would say that's enough of maps, and I'm not representing a map. I'm representing really people, and for CEPF, this is the core of all of the work, is that we really represent those people that in the ground, in the European forest, work, manage, take care, and pass on their heritage to the next one. Just to say a few words about European forests. I know we have a very diverse audience, so I'll that's why I included it. Well, Europe is a very small continent. That's a fact. If you and this map just show you with again shade of gray, and I must be very thankful because the two maps that I've shown are from EFI work. That's the amount of forest that you have. The darker the shade, the more forest in terms of land use you have. But that's just green, and I'm being told, okay, well, Europe is a very small continent, but on the other hand, we have a lot of diversity of type of forest. And forest, this is very key. Here, I've kept less than 10 forest picture, just for the sake of them remaining visible. But they are very, very different, very, very diverse, and they have to be taken into account when we do policy design, that you cannot have the same approach on each of these different type of forest. But I've already said policies, so I'm jumping to the core topics. So policies and European forest related policy. So first, I will just take you very quickly in time space, just to show you what at the European level, so at the European Union level, how it evolved. And through the years, they always were forest-related policy, but their number increased, and extremely increased in the last years. So now we have quite, so those are the policy that as CEPF we have identified are relevant policy when it comes to forest. And we say forest related policy because it's not like agriculture where Europe has this common agricultural policy. You don't have a common forest policy. So forests are addressed through many different ways. And this led me to one of the topic of the day, achievement and limitation. And here I am using a picture to get you an idea that you've seen the amount of policy that we have that relates to forest. And as well as they can achieve a lot, the issue is often that are they coherent? Are they organized between themselves? Are they harmonized? And that's really is one of the key limitation is that there is so much that sometimes we have different policy with goals that goes in opposite direction. And then as a forest owner, even if you would be supporting the goal which is put forth, how do you do? Because you're going to be asked to do two very different stuff. So that very something which is one of the big limitation is sometimes there is a lot. And if you want to have something which is too tailor-made because of the diversity of the forest, it doesn't work. So what do we do as CEPF in that context? Well, this slide is very like the basic core message that we have is that we have a diversity of forest, and we also have a diversity of forest owner, because I may not have emphasized that enough. But all of these people are different. They live in different area. They'll have a different socio-economic context. They have different interests, and they're going to manage their forests according to those very personal interests. So you have to manage with all of that diversity. And therefore, when you look at forest management and policy which relate to forest, you have to make sure that you keep this diversity possible, that you are flexible and large enough to really allow everybody to thrive and to keep motivated in that. So at CPF, our work is very to bridge the gap between this EU bubble on one hand that I mentioned and practice. So on one hand, we will really bring practice experience to the EU discussion. And we're going to digest the discussion because obviously we are in administrative legal jargons that is not necessarily accessible. So that's our job to make sure that it is understandable. And just in a few pictures, how do we do that in practice is that, so first is really like bottom up, that we are bringing the info from our colleagues in the ground at the EU level. And it's going to be through position paper, through engagement, press release, through event that we organize, where we really usually put forest owner at the foreground. We did, if you have the time, we have a series of video in YouTube, which is Welcome to My Forest, where we ask our member, well, could you do a face cam? Could you go in your forest and tell us, how do you do it? How do you decide that you manage your own work? And also, like with the share of expertise is going to be going to expert meeting of the commission and so on. But that's really so towards the EU bubble. But there is all of the work backwards. And on that, we have a lot of internal expert group, bilateral exchange, monthly meetings. So we really keep a very constant and very intense exchange with our member to translate what is the current discussion, to explain, okay, well, this upcoming legislation is coming. This is the goal. This is how it is phrased. Is it feasible in practice? And so on. So it's very like making sure that the legal discussion is understandable at their level. And I was also asked to say, okay, but what's for the audience? How can you get involved? The thing with private forest ownership is usually it's an older generation that often owns it. It's not always the case, but often. But first, there is at the family level, it's not because it's your grandparent that owns the land, that as a child or a grandchild, you're not involved in the management. So that's already like getting involved. And you might get involved within your own management, but you can get involved with your national, with your regional association, and so on. So that's already one step. And as a student, and that's why I must say I've been a very egoistically putting a picture of me a few years back, a few years younger. But if the policy discussion interests you, there are many ways to get involved. And one of the ones that I personally would recommend is getting traineeship, whether it's within the European Parliament, the European Commission, but also all of the other organizations, including mine, that are aside. There are opportunity to come have a look, see how you can bring your own expertise, which is often very, very much needed. So that's something like bridging this gap. And also in getting involved is we realize that sometimes forest management, why do you cut a tree? And so on, is misunderstood. So there is a lot of communication, peer-to-peer communication and explanation of where is forest management going. And last but not least, getting involved is also keep being motivated, because for us, it's very important that the next generation takes over. And whether it's within private ownership and management, that the management is being carried and there is no land abandonment, but also in all of this current discussion, well, you're the next generation, so will wait for you at the next corner. So that would be it on my side. I hope it was useful and insightful. Thank you.
Thanks, Hélène. As usual, it was very insightful, and I'm sure that our colleagues and the youth that are hearing us will definitely take over and also use your advices. Actually, it's also very interesting what you presented to us, because we've been hearing what is then the role of the owners? How do the owners understand policy? Who does help them in Europe? And here you guys with CPF comes in. I think that's actually a very important role, which is quite complicated. As you mentioned, in Brussels, sometimes we have a bubble, and the bubble need to break out, and we need to spread information clearly to colleagues and to new others. So thanks a lot. But I think, my dear colleagues online and him with me in the room in Bonn, it's time for us to enter our question and answer session. We will have approximately 13 minutes. So our speaker, I can see them. They're still aligned on stage with us. They entered the stage. They aren't waiting there. But we will start now. So let me then open my dear chat with my colleagues here in the room. And maybe I might start with you. No, I think that before, I'm sorry, colleagues, I forgot one very important fundamental point. I'm getting too fast as usual, as an Italian sometimes. We are fast. Bas, I don't want to forget about you. Of course I cannot. So, Bas, would you like to give us maybe your overall view on this discussion that we're having with Suzanne and Hélène? Or would you like to take the mic afterwards, after the Q&A? I leave it to you, actually. We make it a bit different than from the script. Don't hate me, colleagues.
Maybe 3 short comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank Suzanne and Cécile and Hélène for their presentations. Very interesting. And I would like to take 3 messages from them. First of all, I think there are clear linkages between, let's say, the abstract policies at the international level and the very concrete local practices. If you look at forest and landscape restoration, on the one hand, you have the Bonn Challenge, the international initiative. You also have the Global Landscape Forum, where also non-governmental organizations are involved. And you have these local initiatives, Suzanne, you were talking about. If you look at community forest management, we heard the examples from Cameroon and DRC and Tanzania, but you also have these international networks on community forest management, and the role of communities is endorsed by many international instruments, also by the United Nations Strategic Plan on Forests. So there is also a clear link between the international and the local. And finally, talking about forest owners in Europe, they also have the linkages with let's say, the Brussels bubble, as you called it, Hélène. So that's interesting to see. So you think maybe my introduction was a bit abstract? Yes, it was, and is very complex, but are clear relationships with these more concrete examples and cases which were introduced by you. Secondly, the role of stakeholders in policy, which is also very crucial, which you also showed. You have these landscape stakeholders, people who live there, who produce, consume in the landscapes. You have the communities who play an important role in forest management, and you have the forest owners who may keep the policymakers with their feet on the ground. And the third point is, yeah, policy is very complex. I showed it to you. The international system is complex. Hélène showed the complex European system. And therefore, there are also lots of problems with implementation, not in the least that you have these contradicting policies. So therefore, it's important that these stakeholders do relate to policy with their advocacy, with their advice, with their expertise, but sometimes also to implement policies in, let's say, their own way, like communities do in Africa, like forest owners do in Europe, and like, let's say, landscape stakeholders do in this forest and landscape restoration initiative. That's what I would like to say, Sylvia. Back to you. Sylvia, back to you.
Hello, sorry about that. We had an issue with unmuting myself. Sometimes it's good so I don't speak too much as before. But thanks for the nice connection about related to our three speaker plus you, then 4 on board. That was a nice to know that actually we need to see also interconnection among the topic that we just discussed today. So I know, colleagues, we are a little bit late, but I might want to go on with the Q&A. So bear in mind that this session will last a little bit more. I think we can enter that. And also, speakers, sorry to take you on board with us for a few more minutes. So maybe I do start with Elaine first. I have a question here for you from our colleagues online. And the question is the following, Elaine. Can you explain the unique challenges dividing forest management as government versus private property? So I guess here is a forest management perspective from a state versus a private owner, if I interpret a little bit this question for you. What are the unique challenges that might appear in forest management?
Well, it's the key, and one of the first challenge is the scale. Most private forests in Europe are rather small, up to very, very small. So in all of your management, you're going to have to take into account that you have a very limited space. That's why you have more and more grouping of owners that try to manage, if not together, at least in a coordinated manner. You have also very much this generational issue that you're passing on, but is the person that you will be passing on interested? How do they involved? And sorry.
I got a bit of connection issue with you, Elaine, but I hear you until the generational part, correct? This was the end of your answer.
We'll continue. I have someone else audio coming in. I don't know if it's the case for you, but I will just try to continue.
Yeah.
So that you have this very small scale, and then you have the very simple notion of the privacy of the ownership. And here it's something that you have to take into account that what is private depends in every European country. I really like at the example, you have this. Sorry, I'm again having this other audio, very disturbing. So you have the different type of, if you are in, you don't have any, you can go in anybody's forest because you have this notion of the right of access. You can pick mushroom and everything according to a reasonable quantity. You have other country where you cannot enter a private forest unless they allowed you. You cannot pick mushroom. So that's why this locally suited approach are often very meaningful because it depends. If you want to have all this critical revenue, then this really like wood sale that also takes into account. So that's what I would flag as the key input. You have also the notion of economic viability. In some member states, there is a choice that state forests do not even have to be even. So that's also a change. And as a private forest owner, depending if your livelihood is this forest, or if you have another job, then also it change a lot the discussion. So I hope it complement a bit to the question. I'll cut myself short. I do speak as much as you, Sylvia, you know it. And sorry for myself interrupting, but I had some background now, so I wasn't sure if it was just on my side or in all of yours.
Thanks, Helene. It was very insightful. I hope that the connection and the background noise now will stop. I hear you quite well. I hope the colleagues online and our speakers as well. Thanks, Helene, again. Let me jump to Suzanne. Suzanne, we had a question here for you, and I'm reading through. How these enabling factors related with the progress in forest landscape restoration that you told us before are included in forest policy instruments? I repeat, if you like, how these enabling factors related with the progress in forest landscape restoration are included in forest policy instrument.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I also have these background noises, so it's not easy to concentrate on an answer. Yes, so forest landscape restoration, as you know, we have the UN decade on restoration, and so forest landscape restoration is a major part of this restoration approaches under the UN decade by 2030. This is the one point. The other point, if I can jump from my more to Africa-related examples, that is the EU once again. And as we know, we have this Green Deal, and that's why we have so many political processes at the moment, because the European Union decided to transform the strategies, the guidelines, the regulations, the directives to get it more sustainable. And so one approach is the development of the nature restoration law for the EU level. And so this is still under discussion, and this is also looks to the landscape approach, and there we see a high need for climate and biodiversity to restore the peatlands in Europe. We have severe carbon emissions from these peatlands, and a lot of these peats are also covered by forests, were originally covered by forest, and so this is one point. The other point is to transform the agriculture and to sustain the water household, and that is also again the combination, the mosaic of forest landscape restoration, because if you have the natural deciduous forests that are normally the natural vegetation, you have more water, groundwater supply than more or less non-native coniferous forests in the Mediterranean and the temperate forest. And so this is part of the restoration ideas that forest landscape restoration, the landscape view normally is not part of a specific regulation, because that goes to agriculture or forest, but you need to combine this landscape view to get the whole landscape more sustainable. So there are a lot of approaches to put landscape approaches inside, but it's not an automatical way in regulations how we look at that.
Thanks, Suzanne. This was also quite clear, and also to remind us the importance of the landscape perspective, and also the challenge sometimes to have several policies that we need to consider, as already mentioned. And you bring us to the attention for us the landscape law, the restoration law in Europe, right? A new one as well. Thank you. Bas, you are my next here. I have a question for you. I ask you also to keep it very short if you can, and then colleagues, I think we need to close this session, but let's go first with Bas. So Bas, the question here comes is actually if you could elaborate a little bit more the element that you present as non-binding policy types. So the question is also, are those efficient if they're not legally binding, and how those then are applied at the national level? Sorry, that was my alarm for our Q&A. So I think I hope I was clear, but otherwise I repeat the final part. So how those are efficient and how those are applied at national level, for example. Thank you, Bas. I give you a few minutes for that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, this is an enormous discussion in the scholarship on international policies, international governance in general, but also international forest policy and governance. What is the status of these non-legally binding instruments? Well, what it means is that they are not embedded in formal international law. So in that sense, they are less strong in their obligatory nature, but he used other means to be effective. And one is, of course, finance, like the bond challenge is not a legal thing. It's not international law. It's a challenge, but governments and stakeholders put money to it as much as possible. They have pledges, and through the money, you seduce, so to speak, stakeholders to work on forest and landscape restoration. And you find similar kind of things in other initiatives. So that's one thing. That's more the let's say the carrot, right? So you don't have a stick in terms of a binding law with sanctions, but you offer a carrot, let's say money. And the third one is, of course, the sermon. So you try to persuade stakeholders and governments about the importance of the topic in the first place, and secondly, also then to make your own policy on it and also try to implement it. But indeed, there are scholars who say because this is all non-legally binding stuff, it's not really very effective on the ground. But I tend to disagree, but because I do see that, and it's not perfect, it's not ideal, but I do see that also these voluntary initiatives from the global level, for example, the bond challenge, or these ideas about community forestry, or also sometimes the ideas of forest owners, which are also not legally binding, do have an impact first on policies and then on the ground. So I tend to see non-legally binding instruments under certain enabling conditions also potentially effective. Sorry for all the words, but I need to be careful here. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Bas. Thanks also for answering the question and connecting to the previous element that we've been hearing from our speakers. I think it was very clear. I thank you all colleagues. I wish I would have a bit more minutes to have 1 minute for each of you, but unfortunately we're running already quite late. So thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Bas. And thanks, Cecile from the online. And thanks you all colleagues. Thanks for coming. It was a pleasure having you all. And now, my dear colleagues, we're going to have a very short break. So we have 5 minutes break. We meet up in 5 minutes. So grab your glass of water, your coffee or your tea, and we will continue with our plenary session number 3 in 5.